This is really difficult to express, but it's true. Is slavery still legal in the U.S.? Yes, under the 13th Amendment exception. And you might ask, what does that mean? So this was put out February the 3rd, 2022. And what brought me to this was some videos I saw over the weekend of a woman picking beans in Florida. And it bothered me because when you saw that woman, you saw other people and they looked like me. They looked black people that were out in the fields, and you didn't know how long they had been out there and what they had been through. And she kind of shooed the visitor away. There was a man that was questioning why she was even out there and what her treatment was. And so it brings me to this. I believe that we have lived a life where we've experienced all of the joys, all of the joys that we could have experienced from people who were here before us that fought for civil rights, which now the acting president is saying it was a mistake. And he's basically going against everything that our livelihood is entailed. So it says visitors have described the drive up to Louisiana State Penitentiary as a trip back in time, with men forced to labor in its fields, some still picking cotton for as little as 2 cents an hour. The prison was and is a plantation. So if that shocks you, you're not alone. Like most Americans, you probably missed the day in the U.S. history class when the teacher explained that we abolished slavery except as punishment for a crime. Or more likely, that lesson never happened. So also, I want to, outside of this article, say there's a swath of people just because they look like they did the crime or they fit the persona of a person that's a suspect, or you've been racially profiled, or for now what we're seeing in the U.S., the way things are going, you can be killed for just holding a cell phone. You can be killed from trying to get away from ICE. You can be murdered because you were out there and you look like the suspect. And so you have no protections because you have essentially no DEI, nothing, nobody to represent you at jobs and at institutions because that has been dismantled. And now it's being said that civil rights was a mistake, and now we're hearing stories of people getting discriminated, rightfully so. And then the disturbing video that I seen over the past weekend of a black woman who, what I was told from people that were doing a little bit more digging because of the language, that she's of Haitian descent, Haitian immigrant, possibly, presumably, allegedly, and that maybe it's a possibility because their protections had been revoked, that maybe in a way to stay here, they're using them on the fields. And to see people that look like me on fields is something we read about in history books or we learned about, and now we're learning that this has been going on and it was hidden from us in plain sight. So maybe slavery, we'd have to ask ourselves a strong question as to, was it ever ended? Or did they twist words, or they used it in a way where they made us think that it was over? But it was easy to just grab people up, and now the way things are so unstable. Any one of us could be out there doing what I saw that woman doing this past weekend when I was looking at that video. It's very disturbing. So it says, a recent poll commissioned by Worth Rises revealed that 68% of Americans don't know that there's an exception in the 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, the amendment celebrated for abolishing slavery. Another 20% think that there's an exception if the sitting president decides as part of wartime efforts or in the interest of public safety. So thankfully, exceptions don't exist. These exceptions don't exist, but slavery very much still does. So let's revisit that history lesson. So this is not very long. It doesn't go past 2 pages, but I'm going to read it. Immediately following the passage of the 13th Amendment in 1865, Southern states and localities used this exception to pass black codes for other vagrancy laws to criminalize and re-enslave newly freed black people. So these laws prohibited black people from moving freely, owning land, congregating, being unemployed, and more. Punishment often included incarceration and then forced labor through convict leasing, a brutal practice in which governments, they leased incarcerated people to private businesses. So remarkably, the conditions created by convict leasing could be worse than those during slavery. Starvation, beatings, they were normal, and the human consequences inconsequential. So throughout the South, annual death rates ranged from 16% to 25% during convict leasing. So enslavers no longer had to shell out cash to purchase and care for enslaved people. As one said in 1883, but these convicts, we don't own them. One dies, get another one. So that was looked at as you're expendable, replaceable. If you die, they'll just get another one in your place. So you didn't matter. And as people suffered and died, states prohibited from these lease agreements. By the late 1800s, some southern states were bringing in more than 70% of their revenue from convict leasing. So the James Prison Camp, which later became the Louisiana State Penitentiary, was one of these labor camps, commonly referred to by its plantation name, Angola, after the native country of the enslaved people who toiled the land before the Civil War. Much of the 18,000-acre plantation was once owned by one of the largest slave traders in the U.S., Franklin and Armfield. In 1880, after Isaac Franklin's death, his widow sold the plantation to Samuel Lawrence James, who had a lease with Louisiana to house its incarcerated population in exchange for the profits from their labor. So James went on the subleased the incarcerated people to private corporations building levees and railroads. So under James' convict leasing regime, people had a higher chance of dying than they did in slavery even. So convict leasing fell out of favor with the public over time, but the enslavement of incarcerated people and the racial subjugation that accompanied it never did. So in 1898, Louisiana outlawed convict leasing. The state assumed control of Angola shortly after, but kept the prison farm going and retained James' sons as plantation managers. And for decades, wardens and other prison staff lived on the plantation with their families and used the incarcerated men as their personal labor force, as Clint Smith recently explained in How the World is Past. Today, Angola is still a working farm with more than 5,000 incarcerated men, 75% of whom are black and 75% of whom are life sentence. So as the largest prison in the U.S. and one of the oldest, Angola's history is critical, but it's also not uncommon. And more importantly, plantation prisons are no longer the only plantations. Right now, there are roughly 1.2 million people in prisons across the U.S. who can be and often are legally enslaved. So when people are incarcerated, they are forced to labor under the threat of punishment and often in grueling conditions for little or no pay at all. So the average hourly wage is 14 cents per hour, and 5 states all in the South, paying nothing at all for most jobs. Correctional administrators exploit and the preference for facility jobs over field jobs in the way that enslavers would grossly demarcate between house slaves and field slaves. So the punishments for refusing to work are again drawn from antebellum slavery, including solitary confinement and then and now more commonly referred to as what prisoners will call it, the box or the hole, and the separation of families through the denial of calls and visits as well. So, like Louisiana, Texas still has incarcerated people picking cotton, even at a net loss to the state. Why, if not to confirm the proximity of slavery and trigger the trauma that runs through black people's veins? Slavery has always been about more than forced labor and wages. It's about power and control, about the ability to establishing supremacy, white supremacy, or supremacy, forcing subordination and degrading pride. And a historian, Walter Johnson, explains it relies on the recognition of one's humanity and the ability to feel joy and peace and pain and fear to do so. But resiliency has kept the abolition movement alive. The fight for abolition of slavery continues on and off today's plantations last year, but #End the Exception Coalition, comprised of more than 80 national organizations, supported Senator Jeff Merkley, a Congresswoman Nikema Williams, in introducing the abolition movement in Congress. The new amendment simply reads, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude may be imposed as punishment for a crime. A dozen words we should all be able to get behind and tell our Congress members to support. So will the passage of the abolition movement unravel the intimate relationship between the U.S. carceral system and slavery? It'll be up to the courts and the will of the people, us, to see it does. And to start, we must accept that a system based on white supremacy and human degradation cannot be the basis of a system of justice. So we must abolish slavery without exception and let the cards fall where they may, because what we cannot do is be so committed to our carceral system that we now knowingly recommit ourselves to slavery. So that is basically the whole article right there. I thought it was pretty much a good way of bringing out what is happening. And we know about, some of us that have read there's a book called The New Jim Crow, and it also involves incarceration, the gross incarceration of people of color. There's other books as well. I believe the author's name is Michelle. But I wanted to bring this out because I had mentioned in Carolina there was nurses that were discussing a flyer that was going around telling them to pick blueberries because they ran away the Mexican immigrant population, or they made them afraid to go out and work. And so right now in California here, what we have is we have an issue with the deportation, and we have an issue with the schools being defunded. The reason why they're being defunded is because there's lawsuits that are going around from the Trump administration claiming that white children were harmed, or white men were harmed, or white people were harmed by civil rights. That civil rights was a mistake, and that white kids didn't get the teachings, that black and brown kids were favored over the white kids. So it's like the reverse of what had happened to people of color. And it's like they're using this flipping glass method, and that's where it sounds like it's coming from. And there's this visceral fighting back and forth in the courts. And what recently had happened was we saw this war erupt, and that isn't sitting well. So there's a whole host of things that are going on. There's a bunch of laws that are being written as we speak that are going against people of color, that basically are dismantling protections. They started like earlier, like last year with DEI, which is diversity, equity, inclusion. Anything having to do, they're on the warpath, anything having to do with civil rights or protections of people of color, they've been trying to just whittle it down to where you have no protections whatsoever. The other thing is universities, they're canceling all the organizations that, if they're organizations that help children or students of color try to protect them so that they can help them to get an education, or try to give them a pathway to get into universities, to get educated, higher education. They're trying to dismantle those, and they, as in the Trump administration, has put pressure on these organizations because in their eyes it is a DEI thing. It is also giving favoritism to people of color, not helping them, rather. So it has been a lot that has been going on, and I wanted to not only bring out the fact that we got this thing here about people being incarcerated. So this is important here. Under the 13th Amendment, the exception if you do crime. What is crime? Now, if you are homeless in the state of California, and if you have an RV, and if you're in your RV, or if you're sleeping on the street, you could get a ticket, and enough tickets could get you locked up in jail, and then you might be sent to prison for whatever. That to them is crime, for being in poverty. Many people are rent burdened here in the state of California, and all over, and in a lot of states, rent has skyrocketed now with this war. Gas prices gone up, food prices are going to go up, money's being sent to places instead of helping the people that are here. Poverty can cause people to be homeless and to lose their protections, the things that they do to strive to thrive. So if you lose those, and if you do end up on the street, let's say you sleep in your car. Oh, that's a violation. You're getting a ticket. That's a crime. You got enough tickets. Now you got a crime on your hands. Or they look at it as a quote unquote, you did a crime, or you did a misdemeanor, could be bumped up to something else. Who knows where this is going? But if you get caught up in that, you could end up right here, what we're looking at. You're enslaved now, because now you're locked up somewhere, and now you're in this situation. You may not have killed somebody. You may not have been, maybe you fit the persona of somebody they're looking for. There are people that are in prison for crimes that they did not even commit, and they are going through what we just read here. And I just thought I would bring that out there. This is the world we're living in right now. I think people, if you had not woken up, you need to wake up right now to what is going on, because this is not getting any better. I hear people, they were doing all this fighting back and forth online, who got oppressed and who was here first. And we don't have time for that. That is not going to help your situation. It makes it worse. How to hurt people is divide people. Make them fight with each other. Then you can pick them off. Now is the time to mobilize, not fight with each other over who comes from where and who's got this and who doesn't have that. So if you see what is going on, and you know that this is wrong, and you know in your heart that something horrible is occurring, and other horrible things are going to occur, you need to be aware, be safe, and you need to mobilize, not be fighting with people over little menial things that aren't going to save your situation and theirs either. Because you could very well be caught up in this and look up and you're like, wait a minute, how did I get here? That is how this is going now. I already saw a lot of this happening before it even happened. I never voted for this acting person. I don't even want to call them a president, because what we're seeing is illegal stuff happening over and over and over, and I'm wondering who is behind this, that sees this and they're not doing anything about it. There's something bigger at work here. So I would say to you, you need to stay informed. I don't know where this is going, but I'm going to show this again. Now, this past weekend, I saw a video of a woman. This woman here, she was on the field, and she was picking beans. And they look like me. Any one of us could be dragged into this. So, if you hadn't been paying attention, you need to pay attention, because this is sad. But someone did a little bit of digging and said that the woman had a Creole accent, sound like she was Haitian. They were Haitian people, because you could hear her talking to a man out there in the field. There were a few black people out there, and I think they've replaced the ones who they had ran off because of ICE. I've heard this acting president say the black jobs. I'm hearing him saying civil rights is a mistake, so the black jobs, what are those? In his mind, and from the way, the trajectory of the attitudes and the things that he's been doing, it sounds like the black jobs are what this woman is doing here, which essentially is slavery, which never really went away. What the lady did her digging said that it had been going on since the 80s, and that it was going on in our faces, and we didn't even realize it, in plain sight. Just that we had saw another group doing it, and people were thinking, well, maybe, Cesar Chavez, they fought for some more money and this, that, and the other. It wasn't what it was. These are farmers, these are workers, the United Workers. Maybe they are supported and this, that, and the other. Maybe slavery is over. But it was never really over. And who's to say it was ever really over, even when we saw other faces doing it? That was why they had the movement. No uvas. No grapes. Don't pick grapes, because they were not being paid or treated well. And I went out to La Paz and I saw what the treatment was. And I saw that some of the kids, from the pesticides they were spraying over the fields, that's what people were eating, and that's what some of the workers were eating, and that's why some of the women who were expecting babies were having babies that were deformed, because they were spraying the chemicals in all of the foods. They have to mass produce these foods to get profits and to put them out there, because they're essentially not really concerned about the health of the people. It's more about the wealth of their pockets. So I know I went long with that, but I'm going to play this video again in this video.
She said, grab me bag. Well, but come on, you just got to witness it. You got to pay attention to the signs. They might be talking to you on the slide. It's okay, it's right here. It's right here, it's okay. Hi. How you doing?
Okay.
Alright. Are y'all okay out here? Sure? Y'all good? Okay. How long have y'all been working out here? Thank you. See that? They're not good.
They're not good? What did she say?
I asked her, was doing alright?
How did she feel?
She said yes. And then I said, you sure? And then when she filled up my bag, she did like this.
Here, I don't know why, they said that there was somebody out here blocking the road and all kind of silly stuff that obviously isn't happening, not blocking the road, but they're just complaining.
Now we trying to figure out what's going on in that field right there, because it looked like a whole bunch of slaves still working in that field right there. There's a whole bunch of black people that don't speak no English, and you got a white dude sitting in that truck monitoring them, and it's just a whole bunch of people picking, look like they're picking cotton, but it's not cotton, so we trying to figure out what's going on with that. Yeah, we see all of
I
that.
saw that, and I was gonna go over there to see if I can fix up stuff. But
Nah,
I don't know
that.
what's
We
going
don't
on
know.
over there, but if y'all don't mind, can you just pull up 2 feet to scale?
Oh, okay, yeah,
because
So this was the people they said that they were acting really weird, acting like they didn't know what was going on, but they had a sense that these people knew what they were doing and they knew what was going on, and that it was slavery. We're looking right at slavery happening right here in the U.S., and this is in Florida, that this right here is happening. And I would say more of this is happening in other places that we're just not aware of. I want to also add, in Pasadena, if they haven't already built it, I heard they were building or they were opening up an ICE detention center. That is another form of slavery. Yeah, I'm going to say that. That is what it is. It's a concentration camp in our time. That's what it is. When you're holding people with no food, no water, and they could die in there. And then there's hepatitis, there's a COVID, there's all kind of diseases, things that are going on that are being spread, and the people are not getting proper medical care. It's a concentration camp. That's what it is. So I adding that in there. So we're seeing all of the things that we read about. If you were like me going to school and college and you read about that stuff and they made it seem like it was a long time, it's not a long time ago. It's still happening. And we're seeing it happening now more out there in our face. They're not even hiding it anymore. What might have been happening if they were hiding it, it's not hidden anymore. So it's time for people to start looking at the truth. Stop thinking that this person is your ally and he's helping you make this America great. It is not great right now. It's not great. It never really was. Like whatever they're saying, it might have been great for a couple of folks thinking that they had the upper hand over other groups, but it was not great. Nothing that has been happening that I've been seeing on the news happening in our world is great. Okay, so wake up to what is going on. See what is happening. Stop being in the dark about this. We're on borrowed time right now. We're moving like things are normal. They're not normal. We're not doing well right now. The U.S. is not doing well right now. What's happening is not good right now. Stop pretending like things are normal when they're not. They're not.